Welcome to Friendly Disruption. This is episode 7. With us tonight, we've got Buddy Berry, superintendent from Eminence, Kentucky. We're super excited to have him with us tonight. And we're going to be looking at the tool. It's an iOS app called Prismo. And that's where we're going to start. Now, normally it would be Maggie starting with the tool because this is kind of her bailiwick and she's a little more knowledgeable about such things than I am. But this is actually one that I'm really excited about and have seen a little bit of. And Maggie's just getting back into the swing of it too. She's just coming back from bringing in a new one into her family, and we're super excited about that as well. So Prismo, it's an iOS app. I think it's also available for Android. There's a free version and there's a paid version. It's spelled P-R-I-Z-M-O, and you can get the free version right out of either the Google Play Store or the App Store. And what it does is it is a great OCR app, which is an app that captures analog or paper text and turns it digital, so you can get it readable in tools like Read and Write for Google or any other screen reader you have. One of the problems we're trying to solve in my district is trying to find ways to easily make these sort of existing instructional materials available to all kids. And the idea here being, again, that not just for the kids who need it essentially, the kids who would have it required for a 504 plan or for an IEP, but for everybody. Because, here in Iowa, we have such a, ubiquity of devices and these screen readers are so available, it really should be, and I think, a choice for all kids. And so we were looking at ways to try to handle this problem of getting the existing stuff out there and figuring out how to take those existing teacher-created materials and get them set up. So I met with some folks from our local AEA, Kelly Robertson and Julie Freed from Grantwood AEA, and we sort of put our heads together over the course of the summer and brainstormed some stuff up and came up with Prismo. And we have the paid version. It only costs $10, and if you buy 20 of them through the App Store, they cut that in half. So if you're going to buy 11, you might as well buy 20 because it's going to be the same price. And so if you're planning to spend, a couple $100 on it, it goes a long ways. But what you can do with Prismo, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, and for those of you who aren't watching, this is going to be almost pointless. So I can only explain it to you, unfortunately. But the Prismo app, I've got an iPad actually right here with me. It pops up, and I'm going to actually show it on the screen here. And it gives you the ability to work just like a camera. And so what will happen is you'll take a picture of a text document, and I'm going to show you some of the text that I'm going to try to capture in a second. This is a document from my spouse's work, pretty text rich, some different formatting. And what you'll do is you just mouse over or put your iPad over it. I'm going to try to do this right over here. Hit the camera icon. And I'm just going to take a picture of it. It's going to count down. Maybe you even heard it. Did a little beep, beep, beep countdown. And then I'm going to hit, I'm trying to show you here as I do it. It's kind of awkward. I'm going to hit done. And then there's a little button up here that says recognize. I hit that, and it's really cool. You can see a little window comes down, scans the whole text. And then in a second, it's going to pop up its version of what I saw, and it gives me a readable version of that document in a PDF format that I can mail to myself, saved right to Google Drive, do anything with. And so instantly I've got that text there that I can work with Google Read and Write or any of the other screen readers out there to annotate it, to have a kid listen to it instead of having to process it, to enlarge it, to take any of the tools that we have available digitally to bring to bear on this text that was only in paper just a second ago. It's that easy. We're like, again, I've used this term about 3 times, but we really are super excited about this because we have so many iPads deployed in our district that it's a really easy and quick way for us to gain traction and for us to say, okay, teachers, and even more importantly, kids, here's what you need to do to make this material more accessible to you. As I always say, one of my big mantras this summer has been, choices like this is really one of the ways. It's not the only way, but it's one of the ways that personalized learning looks when it's in action. It's kind of how it is. We give the kids the option to say, okay, do you want to listen to it? Do you want to read it? Now, that's only true, of course, if we're talking about consuming content. But The main point is if you're just talking about consuming content, this is an incredible way to make those tools available to all kids of different learning styles. And we all know, if you've worked with kids, that sort of choice is a really big deal in getting kids moving forward. Now, I talked quite a bit. I'd like to let Buddy or Maggie talk a little bit about the tool, and then we'll give Buddy a chance to introduce himself here in a second. But I want to let Maggie chime in and hear her thoughts on it, because we've talked a little bit. We haven't talked much all summer, so I'm dying to hear what she has to say. So I'm going to unmute myself and let her go.
I am just so excited to be back with you. You have no idea. Just to hear you in your role talking about creating accessible text in those terms makes me so excited. So I'm in a new position this year, and we are rolling out a lot of this work that you guys have been doing for the last year. And it's a challenge. And so here you are, a year into this work, and you guys have gone district wide and just, all in. It's really been amazing to watch from the sidelines. And now here I am trying to kind of support the same type of effort within a neighboring district. But the tool Prismo is really, it's slick, isn't it? It allows, I know teachers that still have hard copies of things that they've just held on to because it's got good content, or it's something that it's good, right? It's a good piece of material. It's something that they want to use. And so being able to take what they have and instantly turn it into something usable for everybody is really exceptional. And Prismo, even the free version, I would recommend anybody downloading the free version, even just in education in general. It's a great tool.
Thanks, Maggie, and it is exciting to talk to you. So we're going to do a little housekeeping here. We were having some earlier as we were getting started, a little bit of feedback issues, and I think that is primarily because Buddy and I are both not using headphones. So we're going to have to take turns being muted and unmuted. I think if Maggie wants to stay unmuted because she's on headphones, I think it's going to be okay. So we can try that, because I want to make sure we've got organic communication. But before I kind of turn things over to Buddy here for a second, I do want to do a little introduction, and then I'll let him talk a little bit more. Last spring, last April, I had the incredible privilege of attending a digital literacy meeting at Grantwood at AEA 10, and Buddy was a speaker there. I'd never heard of him. I'd never heard of Eminence, Kentucky. But I came out of that meeting going, I want to learn more. and I know that's a really interesting sort of, I don't want to say it's his credo, but that I think it works well for him. So Eminence is a smaller town in Kentucky, right next to Louisville. And Buddy has done some amazing things there, both in terms of engaging his public, his kids, and they not only I've never seen the statement I always make about him is I've never met anybody or seen anybody who takes fun more seriously than this guy. And I mean that in the best possible way, in that he gets great results from it. They've institutionalized the value of fun, but they get great results. And so Buddy is going to be the keynote speaker at iTech this year, next month, and we're really excited to see him there as well. But with that, I want to turn it over to him just to go ahead and introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about his journey, how he came to be superintendent at Eminence, and then we'll have a little conversation about maybe what he thinks of Prismo, because I'm not sure if he's seen that before, or some of the other tools that they do, because they do some really interesting things with digital learning. So with that, Buddy, I'm going to mute myself, and Maggie, you can stay on.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me. It's been nice to get to know you, and been looking forward to being on here tonight. Iowa, if I did not live in Kentucky, Iowa has become home away from home. So looking forward to heading back there next month at iTech. I've heard great things there. I actually have, oddly enough, they scheduled one of our teachers to be with me at iTech, and that's Mr. Donnie Piercy. Will also be presenting, and he is a rock star, so he is worth the price of admission. So if you haven't signed up for iTech, I would go ahead and do so. But will tell you that a little bit about myself. 8th year as superintendent, so it goes very quickly. I was hired at 32 years old to be the superintendent of Eminence Schools, and I would not have hired me. So I appreciate the opportunity. When I got hired, the first year was survival mode, and then it hit me that we needed to get a plan. And so the plan was, let's create a school that we would want to send our kids to. So myself and another gentleman, his name is Tom Coffey, Thom Coffey on Twitter. I'm at Buddy Berry on Twitter. If you want questions or follow up afterwards after the podcast, but we just set out to build a school that we would be proud to send our kids to. And actually now, at the time, the only kid in school was my oldest daughter, and now between Tom and I, we have 7 kids in school. So it is, we do send them there, so they are a part of it, good or bad, and it's come a long way. I can honestly say this, that innovation and personalization saved our school. So we were a school that was failing every single statistic you could, every metric of success, including the smell test. We failed it. Like even the janitors weren't doing a good job. And so 7 years later, 8 years now in the 8th year, 7 years of implementation, we've reinvented school for us, for the way it looks for us, through personalization and tech integration, through really a central vision of, we wanted to be the Disney World of education. We really believe that Disney World customizes and personalizes an experience unlike anybody else on earth, and they have systemic fun. Does that mean that every worker has a ball all day, every day? No, but from the user experience, it is the most magical place on earth, or the most miserable if you're there in the middle of July or hurricane season, I guess, either one. But for us at Eminence, it was about creating a user experience that embedded fun into every element. And and then we took best practice, which the one thing I think that probably a couple of things that are separators from our work and other innovators is that we took best practice and we didn't just abandon it. So like, great questioning is still great questioning. Great formative assessments are still great formative assessments. Classroom management is still essential to every classroom. What we did, though, was we took next practice. So standards-based grading, competency-based learning, tech and grow tools. By the way, loved Prismo. Prismo is now on my must-get list. So that was a great share. That was awesome. But we took best practice and then accelerated it through next practice. So we have a philosophy called yes and thinking. And so it's not an either or proposition. A lot of schools have said, well, you can't have high rigor and make it fun. You can't have high standards and make it where it's personalized. And so we totally disagree with that. Have we had obstacles? Have we had setbacks? A ton. I mean, it's school, you're dealing with kids, so yes. But at the same time, we've seen a lot of success. So we went from failing every metric to 7-8 years later, only one school in Kentucky has ever had 100% college and career readiness one time, and that's us. And so we've had it in 3 out of 4 graduating classes. So like we have seen dramatic results, even to the point of going from the middle of nowhere in Eminence to being invited to the White House twice and at Utopia's filming. And I always say all that to say we have an amazing team doing an amazing work where we've kind of rallied together, where there's no one person taking credit, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. By the way, I got some headphones on, so I think that's going to help. So we can probably stay a little unmuted now. Let's have a little more organic conversation. I was going to ask you, Buddy, one of your yes and thinking, I think, is really an amazing philosophy. One of the guys who I read about that, have you ever read Peter Block? So he's somebody who basically, he's got a book called The Answer to How is Yes. It sounds exactly like your stuff. Whenever I hear yes and thinking, I think about improvisation. Is that where you got that? That's like from Second City, right?
That is not exactly where we got it. I kind of just stumbled on. We were having a lot of staff when we were first, suggesting change, where it was a lot of like, it was really, they were saying yes, but like, yeah, that sounds great, but, and so we literally just kind of came up with a language. Like we just said, look, yes, it's not yes, but it's yes, and here's how we're going to do it. And so we literally kind of, but all of the things you've said, people have shared with me. So except for the Peter Block. So I'm going to write that down.
Yeah. Peter Block's great, man. He's a little more corporate, but he's really interesting. No. So we went to Eminence. We went to your, innovation seminar this summer in Eminence, with our leadership team. And it was an amazing experience. If you can, talk a little bit about what you have kids do, what your expectations are with digital tools for kids from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, because that's pretty interesting. It's so kids do some things that are interesting, or schools do some things that are interesting, but you guys have a really rigorous one. It's cool.
By the way, your all's podcast goes all out because I'm into balloon dogs. So the fact that we have actual dog sounds getting piped in, I'm getting hype over here. The way that it works, I love it. I'm teasing. So the way that it works is that we have a graduate profile with 8 critical attributes. So beginning with the end in mind, we said, what is it that would make a world-class student? So we did about 2 or 3 iterations, a couple of years of tweaking, of trying and failing fast, and we got down to this core 8. Once we got to the core 8 elements, which are things like that everybody has, the ability to communicate, to create, to innovate, things like that, with also some that other people don't really talk about, which is like compete. We do design thinking at every grade level, things that are not necessarily also the norm. Philanthropy is built in as well. And so then we said, okay, it's great to have that document. And by the way, 5 or 6 years ago, it was rare to have a graduate profile, but it was people were doing it. The thing that nobody we found was doing, which we thought is where the power was, is what did it mean to be able to communicate? What did it mean to be able to create? What did it mean to be able to innovate? What does it mean to be able to compete in a global marketplace? So it's one thing to say all of our graduates will be able to compete. Well, what Eminence wanted to do is define that for every grade level. So we started with 12th grade, we went to 11th grade, 9th, 10th, all the way down to kindergarten, and said, we're going to create 3 standards for every single grade that correlates to every single one of our attributes. So there are 24 Eminence exemplars for kindergarten. There are 24 Eminence exemplars for 1st grade. And so we tried for 2 years launching those where it was totally totally voluntary, and we rewarded the fire out of it. So we tried that. And to be honest, we got about 60% of our kids bought in. The problem was we were finding that the 40% that weren't buying in was a big chunk of the kids we really needed to get bought in. And so our board took some drastic steps, and they actually mandated you have to meet the minimum standard, 1 standard out of 8 critical attributes for every one of the 8 in order to pass each grade. So you literally can get straight A's in all of your core classes, but if you do not meet your compete or your create or your innovate goal, the minimum standard, then you get retained in that grade level. Almost had it happen this year. Had some kids have to take summer school this year in order to meet their exemplars. They had passed all their core classes, but did not meet their exemplars. Is that what we want to do? No, we would rather them intrinsically motivate to do it, but it is a way that we had 100% compliance. And so every kid had some level of competency in all 8 critical attributes. And then since there's 3 levels of every category, if you meet 2 levels in every single one of the 8, so instead of just meeting the minimum 8 standards, if you meet 16 standards, then you are a red level completer. And then if you meet all 24, you're a blue level completer. And then so what we'll do for that is we reward the fire out of those. So like to be a red level completer, there's field trips, there's free ball game passes, there's snow cone days, like there's a ton of rewards. And then if you're a blue level completer, you meet all of the standards, you get free field trips, you get science museums. You get overnighters. Like, we reward the fire out of that. You don't ever pay to come to a ball game ever, right? So like, we have a lot of rewards for that. You get a lot of slide tickets. So if you're a blue level completer, we have 2 slides in our school, so you get unlimited slide tickets. So we tried to find ways to motivate for the higher 2 levels, and we had a tremendous success. In year 1 of mandatory implementation, I think we had like 15,000 hours of community service. I think there was like $25,000 raised for philanthropy. I don't have them exactly in front of me, but it was insane. We're a school district of about 850, so we're not very big. That's K-12, and so great results. And then the question you asked earlier, and I apologize because I'm a talker, but like back in the standards, we have like, you have to be able to do coding in kindergarten. You have to be able to do AutoCAD in kindergarten. Like, it builds from K up. And what we found was those were standards that we initially put for 5th grade. And after 4 or 5 years of doing this, we keep saying, well, 5th graders, it was too easy. Okay, 4th grade, well, it was too easy. And so we kept lowering the bar until now, literally, like, to get out.
Uh-oh. We just lost. Buddy froze up. Hopefully he notices it.
Still there, yeah.
Yeah, well, he's locked up, but
for all the kids to earn throughout those levels.
That's amazing. I'm starting to hear myself. I can't imagine the level, the skill level that you're providing to these kids in kindergarten. So here's my question to you. Can you had me at hello. You had me back at the beginning when you said that you had 100% in what? Was it your upon graduation, your college and career readiness?
Yeah, we went and decided 8 years ago when we first started, that we were going to just honestly, like, not put a whole lot of emphasis on any testing. And by not put emphasis on testing, I mean no emphasis on testing. So we really flipped the script. So we went from being very test focused, we were doing awful in it anyway, to being learner focused. So like really worrying about the learner. Now, a struggle we have found is, like, when you're new to Eminence, sometimes when you tell people, well, you're not worried about the test, then they think, well, they can just teach whatever they want. We're still teaching the Kentucky Core Academic Standards. We're just consumed with them making the competencies in that. And we feel like if we focus on the learning, the test will take care of itself. And we have.
And so, buddy, I don't mean to interrupt, but talk a little bit about the background of Eminence and the demographic makeup. Story in and of itself.
Sure. We are about 65 to 70% free and reduced lunch. We're 22% homeless. We live in central Kentucky where there's not a ton of diversity, but we're about 40 to 45% diverse in Eminence. Hispanic population's really been booming lately. African American, so about 50-50 of the 40%, it's about 50-50 Hispanic African American. We don't really have a racial gap of achievement. If we have any gap that's left, it's the special ed gap. Like, that's a gap that we haven't necessarily narrowed. And honestly, we've done it without looking at color or race or poverty. When you go to a completely personalized learning environment, it's just, what standards does that kid know or need to know? And so it literally takes away race, it takes away poverty, because you're looking at the individual kid. And so you're not having to say, how do we reduce African American and males by 5%? We're looking at what standards does Johnny need? And as long as we get the standards for Johnny, it fixes it for the whole system.
No, that's awesome. So one of the other things that I want to make sure we get a couple of the major talking points in that I have in my head. So I'm going to skip around a little bit, but I know that to get there, one of the things, and I've heard you talk about this a couple of times, is the terms surprise and delight. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you've leveraged that and how that's sort of, you've talked a little bit about engagement, but let's really, you guys are serious about this.
We're very serious about surprise and delight. So surprise and delight is the element where something awesome happens where it's not scheduled to happen. And so I always give examples, like when you check into a hotel and they have like a nightly cookie service. Like, that's a surprise and delight. Like, not every hotel does that. Another surprise and delight might be that you go into a restroom and they have real towels instead of like paper towels. Like, that's going the extra mile. And so we relay that to teachers on how can you make your lessons be awesome? Like, how do you make your lessons where it's a surprise and delight, where it goes the extra mile? And so an example that I've seen that I've used, it can be as simple as rewarding them with a treat, or it could go as far as, and we level these things like 1 to 4. And it's easier to know what a 1 and a 4 is. 2s and 3s get a little fuzzy. But a 4 would be like, I was walking down the hall and I heard a history class that didn't sound like a history class. And so I walk in and the teacher had spent all weekend making it into a speakeasy. So her classroom was an entire speakeasy. That was awesome, right? I've gone in, I went in what class was it last? I went in a dance class, and this teacher had the entire football team doing ballet pretty good. And so, and she had motivated them through her own personal story. Like, she had shared a story and had connected it and then dedicated the dance to that story. And, it was awesome to watch. And I had gone in there to like supervise a fire drill, and I ended up leaving blown away. It was a really, it was a surprise and delight. I remember when I first did, like, it was a part of our culture. It was a bit of implementation. And I'm walking down the hall, and a 7-year-old looked at another 7-year-old in between classes and said, that lesson was a real surprise and delight. And so then I was like, well, it's working. Like, it's starting to catch on. But we start sharing surprise and delight lessons. So we'll pick 4 or 5. We give a surprise and delight teacher of the month, like the district. And so they get balloons and a gift card and a big fat check that's worthless, except, for the kids in their class think it's awesome. But so we try to really highlight it, reward it, and respect the element of surprise and delight.
That sounds amazing. I want to work there. I mean, it really, no, really though, as a professional, you think about what you want to go do every day. And yeah, the same old gets boring, right? But when you're constantly having surprises and you're constantly putting smiles on people's faces, that sounds amazing. And that's just only part of the story that you're sharing. It's amazing. Amazing.
It's also addictive. So like it's addictive to see the energy and the excitement, and you see teachers trying to outdo other teachers. And it is not in a competitive way, but in a collegial way. And so like Mr. Piercy is probably the foremost Google expert in Kentucky, maybe anywhere. Like, I would put him against anybody. And he drives an hour and 15 minutes to work each way. But because he wants to be a part of the culture and the climate that we have set up at Eminence.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, so you guys get this so deeply. It's all, and you're talking about it sort of globally and holistically, but, when we talk about student engagement, this is what it's about. The experience is something kids get to do rather than something they have to do, right? And that's an amazing thing, because if you can get people sort of bought in and sharing their strength, it's all about sort of a strength-based method. This is how you operationalize it. That's why I thought it was so cool. I mean, I saw you speak last spring, and then we went out and saw the school this summer. And by the way, the slide is great in the Ed Hub. It's great. John Spear and I went down that, superintendent. There's pictures. But it's awesome, and it's not the only slide you have in your building, by the way. That's what impressed me. I was like,
it's inside.
Oh yeah. They have a tornado slide in the building, and then they've got another one inside their cafeteria.
What? Oh.
Yeah, it's an astonishing thing. They're really onto something here, and it's not just frivolous. I mean, it is frivolous, but it's frivolous in a very purposeful way. And the
other part is that fun, people think it has to be slapstick, but a surprise and delight lesson is also one that's really hard, or it makes you really think. Or I've had my kids come home and they'll be like, "School stunk today," and I'm like, "Well, why?" And they'll be like, "Well, it was awful. Like, it was so hard. Like, it was so tough." Well, it was a big problem, and the teacher had not given them like what to do. Like, it was like, you solve it. And so what my daughter was relating was that struggle, that frustration over where to start and what plan. And that's a surprise and delight lesson also. Like, it wasn't this like, ha ha ha, and we do that, but it's also making them think and putting big stuff. One of the things we've really leveraged is to really maximize this is passion projects. And so we do the Google 20 20% school, 20% of the year to work on either teacher or student passions. And we've seen great results with that as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to interject there because you just hit our last guest. Have you ever met or talked to Kevin Brookhauser? Buddy? Have you ever met or talked to Kevin Brookhauser?
I have not, but I do definitely know who he is.
Yeah, he was our last guest.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, so we're totally lining up here. This is awesome. So I'm trying to think. There's so many other sort of interesting things. The other thing I thought was fascinating and really compelling about your story was Eminence is the notion of sort of iterative, or versioning that you go through to make things better. So you call it just twist. You want to talk a little bit about that story? I'm kind of probably stealing some of your thunder here, but I don't care.
I end up having to say, but I will tell you, it is a continual improvement. Like it's a continuous improvement. Like we never rest on our laurels. So like as a matter of fact, my wife at some point, I was like, I was in the midst of this big project, and it was the first time we had tried something. And I said, it'll get better at the end of it. And she goes, no, it won't, because you'll do your next thing. Like you're always thinking of like what's next. And so I'm never trying to be complacent. But we're seeing it systemically change our kids. This summer, we're in and out of stores, and I, as a family, I kind of have a family motto of one go, all go. So we take everybody everywhere. And so we were in these stores, and I was looking at these stuff, and one of my kids was like, man, I would love to have that. And it was one of the younger ones, like the 5-year-old. And the older ones were like, don't buy that. I'll make that. I'll design it on the laser cutter. Like our kids are starting to get a hold of, like, I can create or make any prototype or solution that I want. It really roots in design thinking. Lots of people talk about design thinking. We embed it as a part of our culture. So beginning in kindergarten all the way through 5th grade, they take 4th grade, they do a different step of design thinking. And then in 5th grade, they pull all of that together so that they can work through the entire design thinking process. And then we give them some problems in front of a panel. They have to do panel exit reviews, almost like a little mini dissertation. They have to do that in 5th, 8th, and 12th in order to graduate elementary, middle, and high school, which is awesome. Like, it is mind-blowingly good. The kids take it very serious. The panels really bust their chops, and that's really fun. We've never done it. I need to videotape some of those so that people can see what good ones and bad ones look like.
Yeah, those would be really powerful. Go ahead, Maggie.
Well, what I was just thinking is, as I hear you talk about this mindset of I'm a creator, I'm an innovator, I can do these things. Oftentimes I live and breathe in the world of special education of students with disabilities, and so oftentimes those are the things that we see missing in our kids with disabilities, and whether it's just for a million different variables and reasons that I'm not going to get into, but I can only imagine. I know you said that you weren't necessarily targeting that specific population in all of this work. They're definitely benefiting when they're being introduced and able to engage in the same type of learning and this same type of mindset over a long period of time. That's got to be life-changing for kids with disabilities, and obviously their peers as you've talked to. But that's amazing.
Well, and we do hold them to the same standards of the exemplars. The part that we just haven't closed the academic gap. So like the skills that they're picking up, like the community-based problem solving, the internships that we require, all of that, we're seeing tremendous progress out of our special populations. For that, like, perseverance is a problem through everybody. Like, one of our standards is to the ability to persevere through difficulties. I'm an old football coach. I read an article today that, like, football participation rates are at an all-time low. Is that because parents are worried about concussions? Maybe, but I think it's more that football's a really hard sport. Like, it's 95 degrees outside. It's the middle of summer. It's physically demanding. It's mentally demanding. And I think kids lack some of those perseverance traits of even maintaining a job or getting to work on time every day. And so it's exciting to start to see some of that mindset shift also.
So I think that's a great point. And you know, about grit and all that sort of thing. And you know, you got to be kind of careful because you can, you know, I've read and seen some stuff by like people by like Alfie Kohn who will like attack you if you start talking too much about grit and rigor. But I think you're right, and I think that's a really essential life skill. So can you talk a little bit about what you guys do to intentionally design? I'm really just genuinely curious because I don't know that I even heard that when we were up there. How do you guys design to build resilience or grit or perseverance or whatever you want to call it into those? I mean, you got the standard, but what does that look like for you guys in terms of how do you know you're getting there? How do you progress monitor that?
So the exemplars are the accelerant to 100% of our work. So the philosophy that we employ for what you're talking about is we believe in giving kids like a massive toolkit. So we will expose them to hundreds of tools. Some are digital, some are virtual, some are life skills, some are micro credentials. It could range from coding to AutoCAD to laser cutting to how to use a ruler to how to use a table saw to how to weld to how to code. So like by the end of 5th grade, kids' toolkits are well over 100 of those strategies. And then starting in elementary, but really accelerating through middle and high, we go and say, okay, here's a problem way bigger than what you could solve just thinking it through. And then which tools are you going to pull out of your toolkit to solve this big problem? And so those are exercises that are embedded into the exemplars or just into the teacher's classes. So like in 8th grade, they do a legacy project where they have to create empathy from like the elementary and the high school and say, you know, what would be something we could go and raise money for or design or build that would leave a legacy and an impact on our school. And so, or maybe it is a problem like we do museum days. So like 3rd graders are responsible for creating a museum day in our entire building, our entire Ed Hub. And so then they have to build like museum exhibits and then they design that user experience for the rest of like middle school. And so these 3rd graders are having these issues that are way bigger than them and trying to solve it from the user standpoint, from the empathy standpoint, and trying to pull these other tools in place. So we believe in see a problem, fix a problem, and we want those problems to be so big that they have to dig into their toolkits real deeply.
Yeah, and that's sort of a nice mesh then of your design school thinking, right? I mean, that all sort of blends together coherently. It's not just one more thing everybody's got to do. It's all part of the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's really amazing. Well, we're coming down to about 40 minutes, which is about what we told you we would talk to you about. So is there anything before we cut loose today and kind of wrap up that you want to make sure that anybody listening knows about Eminence? We haven't given the school URL the address or any of that, so we probably want to do that. Anything else you want to think, words of wisdom, any of those things along those lines, final parting shots?
No, I do want to thank you for having me. The time went really fast. You all did a really good job, and I'm a really long talker. So I apologize for that in advance or in post, I guess, post-fact. Eminence, the biggest thing I would say to leave you with is that if we can pull off change here, and it doesn't mean that it's perfect. We're far from perfect. But if we can do it in the middle of nowhere with no money and no expertise, anybody on earth can do it. And so that's a credit to our team. It's also a credit to just the power of a bunch of people pulling together under a common vision and honestly saying, we're going to do whatever it takes, even if it's uncomfortable, in order for our kids to compete globally and to really bring life where there was no life. And so I would encourage you to start somewhere. If you don't know where to start in the innovation process, you know, a good place to start is honestly podcasts like this. It's starting with one cool tool or one cool strategy and just start somewhere. Like, don't wait until you have it all figured out, but just jump out there and make something happen. And I promise you won't regret it and your kids will love it.
Well, thanks so much, buddy. Again, Buddy Berry from Eminence, Kentucky. We talked about iOS. And if you have any questions, you can follow us at FDisruption on Twitter, or you can email me directly. The links are right on the website. So that'll be it for this week. Thanks a bunch.